The meeting starts at 9 a.m. By 9:07, one chair is still empty. By now, everyone else is exchanging that look. We all know someone like this. Maybe you are this person. The one who's always 5, 10, 15 minutes behind schedule, sprinting through closing subway doors, sliding into appointments with a breathless apology. The world runs on clocks and calendars. TikTok, you're late. But somehow, these chronically late people seem to live in a different time zone, one not found on any map. We call them disorganized. We call them inconsiderate, flaky, even selfish. It's easy to judge a late friend or coworker as if they just don't care. But what if that's a projection? What if chronic lateness isn't about disrespect at all? The truth is, habitual latecomers aren't trying to be difficult or rude. Often, their lateness is a signal of how their mind works, how they experience time, emotion, and motivation differently. In a sense, many always late people have solved a psychological equation the rest of us didn't even know we were grappling with. To understand it, let's step inside their heads and explore the surprising psychology ticking beneath the tardiness. First off, it's not usually about laziness. In fact, psychologists note that chronically late people are often wrestling with internal states, anxiety, distraction, ambivalence, rather than a simple lack of regard for the clock. Lateness can be a symptom of an overly busy mind or a heart subtly at war with itself, not an absence of effort. So when we assume Bob is late just because he's sloppy or careless, we might be missing the bigger picture. One big piece of that picture: they experience time differently. No, they haven't discovered time travel, if only. But many late-running folks genuinely misjudge how long things take. There's a classic bias at play called the planning fallacy. Basically, the belief that our plans will unfold perfectly. Spoiler, they rarely do. Research shows that on average, people underestimate the time needed for a task by about 40%. If most of us are that bad at guessing times, imagine someone who's especially prone to optimism. Chronically late people often truly believe that showering, getting dressed, walking the dog, and answering a few emails will only take 20 minutes before they leave for work. An hour later, they're barely out the door. It's not that they want to be late. In their mind, they scheduled everything perfectly. It's just reality that refused to cooperate. Closely tied to this optimism is a tendency to multitask like crazy. Ever notice how perpetual latecomers try to squeeze in one more thing before they leave? They're sending that last email, tidying up the kitchen, and packing their lunch, all while they should already be in the car. It turns out people who prefer juggling multiple activities, what psychologists call polychronicity, tend to be later than those who do one thing at a time. In a 2003 study of New York City subway operators, the conductors who loved multitasking were significantly more often late to their jobs. Why? Multitasking makes it harder to keep track of time. When your attention is split, you lose a bit of awareness of the clock ticking by. The very people trying to do it all end up forgetting that time waited for no one, while they were busy checking 5 different to-dos. Personality plays a role here too. Some of us are naturally type A, those punctual, hyper-efficient go-getters who feel the seconds slipping away. Others are laid-back type B folks, who operate on island time no matter where they live. In fact, type B individuals are statistically more likely to be chronically late. They don't feel time pressure the same way type A people do. In one set of studies, researchers found that type A people and type B people actually sense time differently. When asked to guess when 1 minute had passed, type A's internal alarm went off at about 58 seconds. Type B people, their internal minute lasted a leisurely 77 seconds. That may not sound huge, but over an hour, that difference can snowball. No wonder the laid-back friend isn't rushing. They quite literally feel like they have more time than the rest of us. Related to this is the trait of conscientiousness. This is one of the big 5 personality traits, and it measures how organized, disciplined, and responsible you are. High conscientiousness people tend to build in buffers, plan ahead, set reminders. Not surprisingly, conscientiousness has a strong, consistent link to punctuality. People who score high on this trait are far more likely to arrive on time. They've packed their bag the night before, checked the traffic, and show up at 8:55 for that 9:1 meeting. Those low in conscientiousness struggle with exactly those habits. They're disorganized, forgetful, not great at self-monitoring time. If you hand such a person a detailed schedule, it's almost an allergic reaction. They just aren't wired to love planning. It doesn't mean they can't ever be on time, but it means punctuality is swimming upstream against their natural current. Now, sometimes chronic lateness is less about personality or optimism and more about how the brain is wired in a neurobiological sense. Ever heard of time blindness? It's a term researchers use to describe the way some brains can't sense the passage of time accurately. This often comes up with ADHD, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, and similar conditions. For someone with ADHD, 5 minutes can feel like 30 seconds, and an hour can evaporate without them noticing. They might sit down to send one quick text, get hyper-focused on something, and suddenly half the morning is gone. It's not willful, it's almost like their internal clock glitches. Neurodivergent individuals, people with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, etc., commonly report this now versus not now relationship with time. If something isn't happening right now, it might as well not exist, including that meeting at 3 p.m. So they end up late, not because they're careless, but because their brain genuinely lost track of time passing. Imagine living in a world where time is a slippery concept. You'd probably be late a lot too. Alright, so we've got optimistic planning, multitasking, personality, even brain wiring on the list. But we're not done. Emotions play a huge part in chronic lateness. Some always late people are frankly anxious or overwhelmed. Paradoxically, their anxiety about an event might make them delay going to it. Think about it. If you're nervous about a job interview or you feel socially awkward about a party, you might unconsciously drag your feet leaving the house. Less time there means less time feeling anxious. Psychologists have observed that some late people are trying to minimize the time they have to feel uncomfortable. Showing up late to that networking event means you didn't have to stand around making small talk for as long. You spared yourself 20 extra minutes of anxiety, at the cost of being late, of course. Similarly, some folks genuinely dread being early. It sounds odd to the punctual crowd, but being early can feel like wasted time or even trigger feelings of awkwardness. What do I do with myself now? So they purposefully aim to arrive just in time, cutting it so close that inevitably they overshoot into tardiness. In their mind, arriving 10 minutes early is 10 minutes of useless thumb twiddling. Unfortunately, that mindset often lands them 5 minutes late instead. Late behavior can also be a form of communication or even quiet rebellion. Picture a teenager who's told again and again to never be late, and then shows up late on purpose. Or consider an adult who's agreed to an obligation they're not fully happy about. They might not articulate their resentment, but it leaks out through perpetual tardiness. As one psychologist put it, some people aren't completely committed to a plan, so their lateness is their way of manifesting that. It's like their subconscious is saying, I don't really want to be here, at least not on your terms. Along these lines, chronic lateness can be a subtle form of asserting autonomy. If you grew up in a strict environment where every minute was scheduled, running late now can feel like reclaiming control of your time. Of course, this isn't usually a conscious thought. Nobody wakes up and says, I'm going to be 10 minutes late to stick it to the man. But under the surface, a part of them is rebelling against expectations and saying, you don't own my time, I do. And yes, there are those who straight up enjoy the drama of being late. It's a bit taboo to admit, but think about the grand entrance. Walking into a room where everyone's already seated, all eyes turn to you. For some, that's a thrill. They might like the little rush of importance or attention that comes with finally showing up. One list of tardiness motives even included liking the feeling of power when you enter a room last. It's a way of unconsciously saying, the party doesn't start until I get here. Again, it's risky. They also risk everyone's irritation. But human egos are funny like that. Closely related is the thrill of urgency. Chronic lateness can create a kind of adrenaline-fueled lifestyle. By always cutting it close, these individuals get a spike of adrenaline racing to beat the clock. Bored with the mundane, they thrive on the last-minute urgency that lateness creates. If every day is a series of mini deadlines and daring escapes, will I catch the train before the doors close? It can be weirdly stimulating. Not exactly a healthy hobby, but it provides a jolt of excitement that punctuality just doesn't give. Let's not forget upbringing and culture. How you were raised and where you come from heavily influence your view of time. In some families, being 15 minutes late to everything is simply normal. Everyone was like that, so it never even felt late. If you see chronic lateness modeled by your parents or community, you might internalize it as acceptable behavior. On a broader scale, different cultures have different time norms. In many Latin American, Middle Eastern, or Southern European cultures, the approach to time is more relaxed. Schedules are fluid, and relationships take priority over punctuality. Showing up a bit late isn't seen as a big deal. In fact, strictly adhering to the clock at the expense of courtesy or conversation might be viewed as cold. In these polychronic cultures, someone would never abruptly end an important conversation just to be on time to the next thing. That would be considered rude. Contrast that with monochronic cultures like the US, Germany, or Japan, where being late is the height of disrespect, and you can see how miscommunications happen. A person operating on a flexible, relationship-first view of time can be branded as irresponsible or disrespectful in a different environment. They might be completely well-intentioned, but they're following a different set of unwritten rules. So, sometimes the chronically late person isn't defying universal law, they're just following the cultural script they know, in the wrong setting. Now, none of this is to excuse chronic lateness as a permanent, unchangeable trait. While it's true that some of us have a natural proclivity to run late, it doesn't mean latecomers are proud of it. In fact, many chronically late people feel deep guilt and shame about it. They've heard the sighs, seen the raised eyebrows. They genuinely hate letting others down. Often, there's a cycle. They're late, feel terrible, vow to fix it, then next time it happens again. Cue the self-blame. What is wrong with me? Why can't I get it together? This emotional spiral can actually make things worse. When you're busy berating yourself, you're not calmly figuring out how to improve. You're overwhelmed, which can lead to more lateness, a vicious loop of lateness, guilt, stress, more lateness. One anecdote from a recovering late person sticks with me. She arrived late to a therapy session, and her therapist gently asked, "Why don't you value yourself enough to be on time?" It was a wake-up call, suggesting that chronic lateness can reflect how you value your own time and presence. If you don't think you're important, it's easier to act like your time, and thus others' time, isn't important either. That's a hard truth, and it doesn't apply to everyone. But it's something worth pondering if you find yourself always late and full of self-loathing about it. Let's talk about the impact of chronic lateness, because it's not just a quirky personality trait. It has real effects on relationships and life. You've probably heard the phrase, "time is money." In a work context, lateness can indeed be costly. One estimate pegged the cost of chronic lateness at $90 billion a year for the US economy in lost productivity, missed meetings, and all the little ripple effects of people not being where they're supposed to be on schedule. On a personal level, being perpetually late can damage your reputation. Bosses might see it as lack of professionalism or commitment. Friends might start telling you an event starts 30 minutes earlier than it really does, just to actually meet you on time. Pro tip: if all your friends conspire to give you fake times, it's a sign they've lost faith in your punctuality. Romantic relationships especially can suffer. Imagine you're always the one waiting at the restaurant while your partner is running late. Eventually, it feels less like oops traffic and more like I'm not a priority to you. One frustrated spouse of a late person put it bluntly: "It's not just rude or inconvenient, it shows me you don't consider me important." Ouch, right? Being late can inadvertently send a message of disrespect or lack of caring, no matter how much the late person does care. It's like a trust battery that slowly drains. Each late arrival is a tiny betrayal that says, "My time is more important than yours." That may not be what the late person actually feels, but it is often how the other person feels. And in relationships, perception can quickly become reality. So, with all these reasons and repercussions flying around, we arrive at a critical question. Is chronic lateness a flaw, a feature, or a coping mechanism? The unsatisfying answer is, it depends. For some, it's clearly a flaw to work on. If your lateness is hurting your career, straining your friendships, and stressing you out, it's a pattern begging for change. It does need fixing, not because punctuality is a moral virtue in itself, but because reliability and respect are. Yet for others, lateness might be almost a feature of how they move through life. It's tied to creativity, spontaneity, being immersed in the present moment. Big picture thinkers and creative spirits often lose track of time when they're in flow. They might see schedules as suggestions rather than rules, because they're following inspiration or reacting flexibly to what's happening around them. That can make them brilliant at adaptable thinking, and great company when they do arrive, even if it drives the clock watchers crazy. In a way, such people have a different rhythm. Society absolutely needs its punctual clock watchers, but it also benefits from the dreamers who aren't ruled by minutes. In that sense, who's to say one approach is inherently superior? It's like asking if a violin is better than a drum. Each has its own tempo. And then there's the element of coping mechanism. A lot of lateness is less a deliberate choice and more a side effect of how someone copes with life's demands. We touched on this with anxiety and avoidance. Another example is procrastination fueled by stress. Some individuals, often those with ADHD or high anxiety, procrastinate until the last minute because the pressure of a looming deadline finally gives their brain a surge of focus-producing adrenaline. In other words, they've unconsciously learned to be late as a way to force themselves into action. It's not a great strategy in the long run. Hello, missed flights and all-nighters. But in the moment, it kind of works for them. Lateness can also be a coping mechanism for deeper issues. Fear of failure. If I'm late, I can blame that instead of admitting I'm scared to do the thing. Fear of success. Showing up on time means fully engaging, which might scare me. Or as mentioned, a reaction to past trauma or control. Arriving late is how I assert that I'm free now. None of these are excuses, but they are explanations. And understanding those explanations is key to changing them. Here's the hopeful part. People can change this habit. It's not easy, but it's possible. It starts with self-awareness. Productivity hacks alone won't cure chronic lateness if you don't identify why you're doing it. Is it your optimistic timing? Then you can practice deliberately overestimating task durations. Try doubling your expected travel time as a buffer, as one time management expert suggests. Is multitasking your downfall? Train yourself to pause other tasks when a departure time is near. Set an alarm that says, drop everything and go. If you realize you have a type B streak, you might need to use external tools to keep you on track. Calendars, reminders, maybe a friend who checks on you. If time truly blindsides you, like with ADHD, strategies like visual timers, audible alerts, or body doubling, having someone do tasks alongside you, can help keep you anchored in the timeline. One study even found that mentally visualizing the steps of a task helps people more accurately predict how long it'll take. So you can bet some late folks are now closing their eyes and imagining every step from locking the front door to finding a parking spot, just to make sure they're not forgetting that, oh yeah, it takes 5 minutes to walk from the car. On the emotional side, if you discover you're late as a form of avoidance or rebellion, you can address those feelings directly. Maybe remind yourself why the event matters to you, or find healthier ways to assert your independence. Sometimes, simply acknowledging, "I really don't want to go to this thing," can prevent the passive-aggressive late show-up. You either opt out honestly, or commit and show up on time as a gesture of integrity. If you're the punctual one dealing with a chronically late loved one, there's hope for you too. Not to change them, they have to do that part, but to ease the friction. It can help to understand that they're not doing it to you personally. As one expert nicely put it, personality traits aren't personal. Someone who struggles with punctuality isn't necessarily disrespecting you deliberately. They simply don't possess the trait that makes punctuality easy. Realizing this can turn anger into empathy. Maybe you build a bit of flexibility into plans. Tell them a slightly earlier start time, we all do this trick. Or agree that you'll meet at the venue so you're not literally waiting on the sidewalk getting annoyed. It's a two-way street. While the late person works on being more timely, the on-time person can work on being a tad more understanding. A little compassion on both sides goes a long way, since no one likes feeling judged. And constant scolding or eye-rolling usually just makes the late person more defensive or anxious, which, as we've seen, might worsen the cycle. In the end, the psychology of people who are always late teaches us something humbling. Humans are wonderfully, frustratingly diverse in how we experience something as fundamental as time. What seems like a simple moral issue, "just leave earlier, duh," is often a complex mix of perception, personality, and emotion. Chronically late people aren't an alien breed. They're responding to internal and external forces that many of us also experience. Just turned up to 11. Understanding those forces turns irritation into curiosity. It challenges the assumption that punctual, more good person, late, more bad person. Maybe it's more like punctual, good at time management, late, needs help with time management, or has other priorities in play. When we drop the moral labels, we can actually solve the problem better, or at least not tear our hair out over it. So next time you're tapping your foot waiting for that friend, the one who will definitely text OMW long after they should have arrived, take a breath. Remind yourself it might not be that they disrespected you. Maybe their morning was an optimistic comedy of errors, or their brains just wired differently. And if you are the perpetually late person, it's not a fixed part of your identity unless you choose it to be. You're not doomed to a life of apologizing for lost time. With self-awareness, some strategic tweaks, and maybe a shift in mindset, you can get better at this. Being on time is a skill, one that can be learned and practiced, not an inborn virtue you either have or you don't. Many former late people have reformed and lived to tell the tale. Alright, let's hear it. Did you see yourself in any of these scenarios? Are you the one always dashing in late, or the one always waiting annoyed on the other side? What do you think? Is chronic lateness something to fix, or just an eccentric quirk to live with? I'd love to read your take. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden psychology of everyday life, consider subscribing. Don't worry, we won't start without you. Hit that notification bell, and you'll never be late to the next video. Thanks for watching, and if you are watching this while running late to something, well, good luck.